Okay, it's 1 o'clock and I know that a lot of you are on your lunch break. So thank you so much for joining me today for the second education session in this program. So great to see so many of you online, and I hope this session will be really helpful for you. Today we're going to cover the beautiful pathway to cardiac recovery, standardized program content for phase 2 cardiac rehab. So that's going to be today's topic. I'm going to unpack that a little bit more. But before I do that, I'd just like to try and advance my slide, which never happens. Let's see. Good old technology. There we go. Okay, just like to do an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pay respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land. We acknowledge that they are of continuing importance of the Kaurna people living today, and we also extend that respect to other Aboriginal groups and First Nations. So I just wanted to get that done, that very important thing. So today, as I said, second program, we're going to do this the second Wednesday of every month with exception to August because of the ACRA conference, which I hope that you're all registered for, which is the 10th to the 12th of August. These sessions are recorded so that you can view them later, share them with colleagues, or catch up on any sessions that you've missed. So last time we covered an overview of the chat project. Today we're unpacking the SPC, and next month we're going to unpack the National Cardiac Rehab Quality Indicators. And instead of having to hear my voice all the time, I've invited some other speakers for the August session so that you don't have to see me every month. So on that note, just for those of you that don't know me, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. So I'm Susie Cartledge. I've been nursing, as you can see here, since I was 4. And just you can see there that cardiac was obviously a passion of mine because I was auscultating my Teddy's heart there, and that was taken in my grandma's fernery. I don't know if your grandparents had a fernery and loved taking photos of you when you were little, but that's what was happening in my family. So I did my Bachelor of Nursing at ACU in Fitzroy in Melbourne, went on to do an honours degree after my graduate year, and have had experience working in private, public and rural hospitals. My favourite nursing experience was working in a 6-bed hospital in Lorne on the Great Ocean Road, and all my good war stories come from there. And then most recently, the last 10 years, I've been in the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne in the cardiothoracic mixed cardiac ward, which at one stage was 42 beds and very sick heart failure patients because we did transplants there obviously as well. So I've also done some research nursing, which is how I've ended up here in Adelaide on the CHAP project. And that led me to do a PhD, and research areas that I've covered to date are resuscitation, implementing, some of you know me from my previous work of implementing CPR training in cardiac rehab, and also the last couple of years at Deakin looking at digital health and mobile health and e-health. So I just wanted to introduce myself and my background for those that don't know me, and just give myself a bit of street cred as to why I'm here doing the CHAP project, and also as a co-author of the lovely SPC, which we're going to unpack today. So enough about me. Today's session is just going to look at what the standardized program content is, why it was developed, what the aims of this resource were, how it was developed as well, so that you can understand, you know, that a lot of work went into this and how rigorous it was, and how we worked out what the evidence base was for this resource. The results, so how did it all come together, and then some features. And I really don't want to take up the whole 45 minutes. We've also got some people here at ICCnet where I am today, so I'd be really happy to sort of open up this session for discussion, to take questions. I'm happy to take questions along the way. You can feel free to type into the chat box, and I'll try and keep my eye out on that, or happy to hold it over for more of a discussion at the end as well. So keep that in mind. Very, very happy for it to be a two-way conversation, but hopefully this gives you a bit more of an understanding of how this came to be. And if you've already been to some of the presentations around this resource, it might be a little bit repetitive. There was a webinar held in March with the Heart Foundation and Safer Care Victoria. So if you've seen that, there's a little bit of crossover, but not too much. So I'll try and keep it brief so that we can open it up for discussion. Okay, so what is it? As I've already alluded to, this resource is an evidence-based resource. We conducted the literature review in 2018, so I can't believe it was 2 years ago already. Time flies. But we did really dive deep into the literature, and I'll go into that shortly in a minute. It was consensus led, so we had an expert advisory group, which I'll show you who was in that shortly. We did have consumers, that is essential in any activity that you do in this day and age. And we also had consumers from the fact that this resource is for you guys, for cardiac rehab coordinators. And so we showed some of the early versions and got some feedback from the ACRA Victoria group. We would have loved to go national, but this was written in Victoria and we had limited time and resources. So we used what we had at hand and we got a group of the ACRA Victoria members together. So what it provides is up-to-date guidance for cardiac rehab coordinators about what content should be included in Australian cardiac rehab programs. It's not about how to deliver it. That would be a whole nother book. But we really just wanted to sort of start from the start and say, what should you be delivering at a minimum and what would be nice to have if you had the resources. And it's a super long name of the resource. I didn't choose the name, even though I was a co-author on this piece of work, but our group has affectionately been calling it the SPC, the Standardised Program Content, or SPC Baked Beans and Spaghetti is how I've been remembering it, but that's just me. If that doesn't work for you, that's fine. You like SPC? Yeah. Okay, good. You just like me singing the song. I know it. So there is the full version, which that's the front cover that you can see on your screen there. And there's also a quick guide as well, which is actually really nice because the quick guide breaks down all the elements and the content that we think should be in an Australian cardiac rehab program. And there's even little check boxes there, which only sort of really dawned on me yesterday when I was putting this presentation together. So the items in red are what we determined, and I'll unpack that for you in a second, is essential in a cardiac rehab program, and the blue is what we've determined is desirable. So if you have the resources and the time, it's nice to have, but the red is essential. So that's that. So the quick guide is also there, and all of these resources are available on the Heart Foundation website. And I also emailed a lot of the links out in my invitation to this session, so you should have most of them. So why did we do this? It's $1 million question, right? We did this because it actually came out of discussions with the Heart Foundation Victoria office, but I know that South Australia was also discussing this around a similar time. And it also came out of discussions from Safer Care Victoria, which is a Department of Health group in Victoria, about the fact that there was no Australian cardiac rehab guidelines, and that we know that your favourite piece of guideline and evidence is from the 2004 Heart Foundation framework. And, you know, by this stage it was 2017, so 2004 was quite some time ago. So it was decided that we really needed to have a piece of work around, you know, guidance for cardiac rehab clinicians. We did have the ACRA core components, which was an academic paper in a journal in Heart-Lung Circulation in 2014, but that only provides broad overarching guidance, but it is very good. And I have to say that because a co-author is sitting at this table. So I'm just trying to, it was excellent, but it didn't break it down.
That means a lot to me.
And really,
Why you just ignored it?
No, we used it. Let me hold that thought. And really, we could see from the few pieces of research that have been conducted around Australia that was a real lack of program standardisation. So Alan Jackson and his group had done a paper, I think, around 2015 that showed lots of differences between cardiac rehab programs across Australia. And look, we need to have different programs to meet different needs of our different groups that we're all servicing, but we also do need to have a core sort of standardized approach so that, you know, if I send my auntie in Melbourne to one program, I know she's going to get the same core deliverables at another program as well. So what were the aims of developing this resource? So we really wanted to develop that standardized program of content that would be the core of all cardiac rehab programs across Australia. And we wanted to ensure that it was evidence-based, that it was standardized but had the flexibility to provide individualized care, that it was culturally aware. And unfortunately, we couldn't write a whole separate sort of guide for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, but we do have a few companion documents that go with this. And one of those is the NHMRC Cardiac Rehab Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander document, which is old, but we had a look at it and it's still, everything seemed quite current and relevant for this time as well. So we just didn't have, unfortunately, the resources or the time to dive deeply into that area. We wanted to ensure that it was person-centered, and we wanted to build on the existing ACRA core components for the authors that are sitting at this table now, because that's important. That base work had been done, and really what we wanted to do was unpack it a little bit further. So how did we do it? So the evidence base, I know people, and especially when I was only a clinician and not a researcher, I'm like, oh, literature reviews and evidence are boring snooze. But it's really important to understand how these pieces of work come together. So we, unfortunately, again, we were very limited by time and resources. We had a small budget and we had 8 months to do this piece of work. So the main authors were myself, and Dr. Emma Thomas, who's in Queensland at the moment, but at the time she was in Melbourne, and my boss from Deakin at the time, which was Professor Ralph Madison, and then we worked with all the other groups of people as well. But Emma and I were the workhorses, and it was a lot of work in a short period of time. So we didn't have, unfortunately, the time to do a systematic literature review, which would be the best way to go about things, the most rigorous. But what we did was hopefully the next best thing. So we had a look at the guidelines from other countries that were similar to Australia. So you can see there that signs up there. So that's the Scottish group, BACPR. New Zealand, they've got guidelines. They're quite old, but they're still there. They're one step ahead with us with guidelines at least. So we had a look at their guidelines and what core components of cardiac rehab were within them. And the next thing we did, and there was 11 of those. Then the next thing we did was to have a look at the literature that was already out there, but we wanted to have a look at the highest quality. So that is the systematic review. So looking at literature reviews that other people have done, but the best quality systematic review is from the Cochrane Library. So we had a look at what Cochrane had, and you might be surprised to learn that there's 14 Cochrane systematic reviews that relate to cardiac rehab. So probably more than I was anticipating. So we pulled all of them out as well. And then I've got it, the next slide will show you a little bit more of the process, but then we sort of mapped out these core areas that we need to cover in cardiac rehab. And anywhere there was missing, we went and found more systematic reviews or the next highest level of evidence, which is a randomized control trial, because they're rigorous, they're not as biased. So we're really trying to use the top level of evidence. And then we also looked at references from these key guidelines and systematic reviews. And that was kind of our process. While we couldn't do a systematic literature review, we tried to do a really comprehensive literature review of high quality pieces of research and evidence. So the actual way we did it was, this probably spells it out a little bit better, was we undertook the lit review as I just showed you, and then we mapped the results of the lit review to form modules. So you'll see in the SPC that there's 10 modules. And then where there was gaps in the literature review that we had done, we went out and got extra evidence, and we tried again to follow, systematic reviews followed by RCTs to fill any gaps that we had. For a couple of the modules, we actually went out and got extra experts. So we already had our own group of experts, but there can't be experts of everything. So we went out and got some advice from an expert in smoking cessation from QUIT. And we also got some advice, I'm just trying to think about, there was one other area and now it completely escapes me. It escapes me, it might come back to me, but we got another content expert for another module. So we really tried to work hard to make sure it was as expert and high level evidence as we could. Then we sent those module drafts to our expert advisory group, which included consumers, for their review and comment. And then once we'd sort of made those edits and additions, then we took those modules to ACRA Victoria. We had a big workshop one Friday afternoon. We lured everyone with free food, always works well. And then they gave us lots of feedback, which was super helpful. And then we finalized that module. So that's kind of the process. So again, remember, this all happened within 8 months. So we were very busy. So the expert advisory group, who were they? Well, there's probably a lot of faces that you recognize here. I probably should have checked that Robin was happy with that photo, but we've been using that photo for a long time, Robin, so in all our presentations, but lots of people. So we had representation from ACRA, we had clinicians, we had policymakers, we had researchers. You can see there's a really wide variety of people there. And we also had, obviously, cardiac rehab coordinators. So Bridget Abel is a top exercise physiology cardiac rehab chick from Queensland. We had Emma from Victoria, who's a very experienced cardiac rehab clinician, Kim Gray, who's now the current president of ACRA, and so on and so on. So I'm sure you recognise a lot of the faces there. And we had consumers who aren't pictured to protect their identity, but we had 3 consumers, and one of them actually came to every meeting face to face, and where we couldn't make a decision, we actually just deferred to him and said, what's important to you? So it was a really fantastic process. So in terms of, I've alluded to the fact that we've got statements in here which are essential, and we've got statements in here that are desirable. So how did we figure that out? So using that group of people that I just showed you in the picture, we actually did what's called a Delphi process. So again, research, boring, but hopefully I can explain it to you briefly that makes sense. So basically this is usually a two-stage process, and it's a ranking process. So we pulled out each statement from the modules and from the draft and put them, as you can see on the screen here. So this statement, for example, was following the initial assessment, cardiac rehab participants should be encouraged to set achievable goals with support from cardiac rehab staff. So no brainer. And then we put the rationale with our references from our literature review, and we also ranked the level of evidence that in terms of what the NHMRC would say that level of evidence was. And interestingly enough, you think this would have really great evidence behind it, this statement, but it just came down to expert opinion. It didn't quite have enough evidence to make it a high level. So we just mapped that out for our expert advisory group. And as you can see here, there's a scale from 1 to 9, and then there's a little exclude button at the end. So they ranked how necessary this part is within cardiac rehab. So 1 was not necessary, 9 was absolutely necessary. And then where there was things specific to specific sort of specialist skills like nutrition or tricky exercise in particular, tricky things like that, we also offered for people to opt out. So that was why the exclude button, like I don't have enough expertise in this area, so I'm going to not rank this statement. So we allowed that as well. So we did 2 rounds of that. In between each round, we had a meeting, and Emma and I would get all this data together, and we would say to our expert advisory group, guys, this, question 22 here, this goal setting, the scores were all over the shop, so we need to talk about that. So it's a way of using the evidence and then using our experts to gain consensus. So that's why it's an evidence-based, consensus-led resource. And then you can see below that that's how we decided what the scoring was. So we had a look at all the data, we looked at where the scores were spread. I won't bore you with that stuff, but it came out in the end that when the expert advisory group gave it a score of 8 to 9 and there was no disagreement that criteria or that statement was essential. So hopefully that gives you reassurance that, we really did follow a rigorous process following the evidence and then guidance from our expert advisory group with consumers, both patients and cardiac rehab coordinators, to formulate this resource. And we weren't just making things up. In the chat project, we have a saying, no makey uppy, has to be all evidence. Yeah. So the results, we came up with 10 modules. Now I know, don't freak out, there's not 10 sessions at cardiac rehab. Wouldn't it be nice if there was? So some of these modules can be collapsed. And you might be looking at these now thinking, oh, I could mix module, 7 and 4 together and that would be my session. So it's just the way it came out in the wash. So we don't expect that each module would be a separate cardiac rehab session. And the chat project's actually working at ways to try and sort of make this as neat as possible and reduce it from 10 to something less to suit what's happening in practice. So that's what it looks like. So features. We really tried to make this user-friendly for clinicians. We didn't want to give you just our lit review and here's our recommendations. We wanted to really help you to use this in practice. And the way this flows, a lot of it came out of those workshops with ACRA Victoria members about what would be helpful to them. So let me just step you through a few of the features. So this is module 3, medication education and review. There's always an aim to the module. So the aim for this one is to increase cardiac rehab participants' medication knowledge by ... Then there's what comes next is the logic. Now, this was actually originally termed rationale, but the Heart Foundation, who put this resource together at the end of the day, thought rationale was a bit too sciencey and nerdy, which probably makes sense when a nerd like me writes it. So they decided to go to logic. So why are we doing medication education review? What's the importance of this? So that's there. And you guys know all this stuff already, but we're just trying to lay it out nicely. This resource is, would be fantastic for everyone, but particularly for someone new coming into cardiac rehab as a coordinator as well. So that box might be more for them. Then we've got the best practice statement. So this first one here is red, so that means it's an essential, what we ranked as an essential item. So educating cardiac rehab participants about the basic indications and benefits of commonly prescribed medication therapies. And then when you go over the page, I'm just trying to remember what I did. Yes, here's another one, also in red. This is best practice statement 2 for this module. We've also got the NHMRC level of evidence for the nerds out there that like to know that. And then we've also got some example content. So we're not saying this is what you have to do, but these are some things that you might want to think about that speak to this best practice statement that you might want to have. This is the way you could unpack this essential statement within your cardiac rehab program. And then we've got the why, the rationale. Why would I be doing this? So we've got some data there, we've got some references there, so that there is your evidence base and that it's supported by the literature. And then when you go, oh gosh, my computer's really unhappy today. Oh, there was arrows. There we go. Rationale. And then you can see the next statement, statement 3 is blue. So that's a desirable statement. So that's if you've got capacity and resources. So for example, this one is cardiac rehab staff or pharmacists, if possible, should ensure that cardiac rehab participants receive optimal cardioprotective medications. And you might be thinking, oh, Susie, that's essential. I do that anyway. And if that's the case, that's awesome. And again, example content for each best practice statement. And at the end, we've got some resources. We tried to link everything where possible. So when you're using this as an online PDF, you can just click away. We've really tried to make it as easy for you as possible. And as Professor Robin Clark would say, is there an app for that? And that's her favorite saying. And she's sitting opposite me for those that can't see. And we have tried to include apps. And we didn't just pull any app off the App Store. No. We made sure that they were either Heart Foundation apps or evidence-based apps as well. So no makey-uppy. And then there's the references at the end of each module, again, for the dorks that want to have a look at where things are going, where things have come from. So that's the features, and that's the end of my presentation for today. And I got through that in 20 minutes, so it's not too bad. So that, thank you. So that really leads us into questions. So I'm very happy for you guys to take yourself off mute or to write something in the chat. I'm just trying to make sure I know where my chat box is. It looks different. Here we go. Every time. I've had a few questions submitted prior to the session. So is there any burning questions from anyone out there? And feel free to take yourself off mute and put your camera on if you want to. Say hi to everyone. Silence.
Do you want to do the questions that you told me you get a copy of it too?
Yeah, so yeah, you can get a copy. So I just had a comment from the floor here. You can get a copy from the Heart Foundation website. The easiest way to navigate there is just Google Heart Foundation Cardiac Rehab, and you can actually get a module. You can go module by module if that's your bag, or you can download the whole thing, which is this, or you can download the quick guide. So we've really tried to make it so that there's something to everyone's taste and the way everyone likes to have the information. I just want to look at that module. I want to look at the whole thing. So yeah. All right. Well, I'll have a look at the questions that I've had pre-submitted by a lovely. We'll keep them anonymous. Oh no, actually, I took a photo. Let me have a look. So any questions from around the table? We've got the lovely catch nurses with us at the moment.
Tell us about, I hear that there's a few, apart from chat, there's a few other projects going on around Australia implementing this SPC?
Yes, I think I know where you're leading me.
I thought in Queensland they were going around and...
Oh yeah, actually I think they are doing something in Queensland, and then New South Wales obviously has a big NHMRC grant there as well. So yeah.
Do you know if anyone in South Australia's implemented this yet?
I think we are it. I think we're the first. Yeah. So really exciting. So we did the work in 2018. Then as with most things, it took a little while to get sorted. Heart Foundation did a big merge in the middle. They went from state sort of chapters to a national company. So that kind of slowed us down a little bit. So it probably properly came out at the end of last year. And then we really wanted to sort of disseminate it a little bit more and talk about it. So that's why we did the webinar, which was funded by Safer Care Victoria in March. So the link to that webinar, which is kind of a different presentation to what I've just given. There's a few slides that are the same, but it's a multidisciplinary webinar with myself, with Kim Gray, physio extraordinaire and ACRA president, Dr. Nicholas Cox, who's a cardiologist in Melbourne, and chaired by the lovely Eugene Lugg from the Heart Foundation. And he was really excellent. He kind of pulled all these different aspects out of us. So that's another nice one to watch if you want another angle on this resource. No questions. Did I just explain it so well that everyone's like, yeah, I'm good?
Are the national coordinators linked with this?
Ah, fancy you mentioned, funny you mentioned that because I've got them right here, Claude. So I don't know if everyone can hear Claudine Clark from down the end of our table here, but she's just asked if the national indicators are linked with the SPC, and the answer is yes. So always hard to time these projects because they're actually happening with separate groups of people, but we were lucky to have Emma Thomas, who is the co-author on the SPC. We're also sitting on the National Cardiac Rehab Quality Indicators group. That's a mouthful. And we did really really try hard to make sure that they aligned so that all the quality indicators that are mapped out, so there's 10 in the national QIs, are included, and they should be essential within the SPC. Although I think I saw one the other day that's not essential. So there might be a few, because these projects were going on at the same time. So we were sort of constantly touching base with that group. What are you doing? So if there's a few that are out, it might just be because we were slightly ahead with our project than they were, and they might have tweaked things towards the end. I can see a question coming through, but it's half formulated, so keep going.
Is this SPC a replacement of the 2004 framework?
Oh, great question. So Claude's, just for those that might not be able to hear Claude, asked, is the SPC a replacement of the 2004 framework? I know you guys love the framework, but my answer would be yes. And hopefully, do you think the way it's set out is helpful to use in clinical practice? Okay. Yeah. It's obviously it's a person. We're never going to be able to.
It's a big document to read.
It is a big document to read, but it's in 10 modules. Yeah. So we've tried to, and there is, the way it's set out is the same for each module. So we've tried to have some consistency there. If you're interested in the national quality indicators, just going back to that, I can send some information out about these as well. There's a paper that was just released in Heart Lung Circulation last month that outlines them, and that paper is calling for field testing of these 10 national cardiac rehab quality indicators, which we will be doing through CHAP as well. All right, question on the chat. Thank you. I'll keep you anonymous if you like. Hi, Susie. Did you look at who would provide each module? Is that prescriptive, or is it up to the resources available? Great question from the floor. Thank you. So that's a really great question. We didn't stipulate who should be providing each module. Obviously, I've got the catch nurses with me here at ICCNet today, and they, are the basis of each module, and then you get allied health in for certain calls. Each program has different access to allied health, I know that. So we didn't prescribe that. So basically, hopefully the resources do within each module help whoever's delivering that module. If that's not your, if you're not a pharmacist by trade, that will help you. There are some best practice statements in here where we say, if you have access to a nutritionist, a one-on-one consultation would be great. I'm very slowly learning the landscape of healthcare in South Australia, and I know it's very hard to get a dietitian or a nutritionist appointment for your patients. So there's a big waiting time. I understand all of that. So that's really good for me to know as we move forward with CHAP and this piece of work. So for instance, it will say, if your client's got a, high BMI, that would be great to have a one-on-one appointment where possible. And that statement will be in blue, and that will be desirable. So we weren't prescriptive about that. We know each program looks different, runs differently, has different resourcing, different funding models. So we tried to just be really general about the what's delivered to patients as at a core, and not the how. So yeah, great question. Or who, yes, who exactly, how, who. I've got a question, keep the questions coming on the chat, or feel free to wave at me and say hi. Oh, good, I answered that question, excellent, got a thanks. So some questions I had submitted before the session was, some rural sites probably have heart failure clients in their cardiac rehab group sessions. So how do we incorporate relevant information for them as well? So we did write this with heart failure content in it. So we were very aware of that as well. So as you go through the modules, some modules may have more heart failure content than others. Again, it's sort of probably dependent on what evidence was available and what resources are available. When we were writing this, we also really dived deep into Heart Online. So do you guys use Heart Online?
Not so much.
Not so much? Okay. Oh, in South Australia. Okay. So it's a state-based kind of thing, because Heart Online was obviously born in Queensland. So yeah. So that it's an excellent resource though. So we did dive into Heart Online. They've got an excellent heart failure section in there. So we did pull that out. So it does include heart failure. So that's an excellent question.
Some metro sites use Heart Online.
Oh, okay, Metro. Okay, right. Another question I had was not all sites would have the help from other health professionals. So we've kind of covered that already. So it's going to be a really good guide for them as well as for new staff taking over different sessions. That's a great comment. And I had a question about the individual exercise assessment. So who will do this? Cardiac rehab coordinators or physiotherapists? Is it just a 6-minute walk test? So that's a really excellent question. I was the poor soul that wrote the exercise module. I probably shouldn't say that because now if you don't like it, you're going to come and tell me. But I did it in conjunction with Bridget Abel, who was on our expert advisory group, and also Steve Selig, who's like the king of exercise in Victoria and works at Deakin University. Have you heard of him? Yeah,
he's amazing.
He's amazing. And I showed him what I'd done with great trepidation. Like, you know, when you're giving something to an expert, you're like, oh, this is all my thoughts. I hope I'm on the right track. And we were at Deakin one day where I was working. He was like, yes. I was like, oh, thank goodness. So I didn't just write it with my nursing expertise, but basically we do want some sort of baseline exercise assessment done. Very hard to prescribe what that is. We do think the 6-minute walk test is probably the easiest thing for most sites to do. You don't need much equipment. There's a script for you to what you have to instruct the patient. You just need a stopwatch. It's not very dangerous in terms of risk to the patient as well. So 6-minute walk test is good, but some metro big centres like the Alfred, for instance, in Melbourne, might do exercise stress testing as part of their baseline assessment. So we've kind of said in the exercise module that, you know, it's good to have a baseline and then to repeat that again as a reassessment. But we did sort of, you know, hint that the 6-minute walk test was the main thing. If you go to the National Quality Indicators, they also hedge their bets. So they also talk about 6-minute walk tests in their exercise assessment, an exercise stress test. Some sites I know do an incremental shuttle test, but I think we need to all be sort of slowly moving towards trying to have some standardization around measurements like this. So I think 6-minute walk test is the way to go. It can be done by a nurse as well. It doesn't have to be done by a physio. So yeah, I think that's a nice one, and it's easy for patients to do and easy to see how they've improved at the end. So this doesn't have to be delivered by a physio, and there's really, really lovely 6-minute walk test instructions. You're probably across this already on the Heart Foundation website as well with a script. It's even got a chart for documenting the test. It's got everything, so that's quite nice as well. So that was one of my other pre-submitted questions. Yeah. Any other questions from the floor? Wow, there's lots of you. So great to see you all online, just cruising through your names. Any problems that you can see with the resource or any challenges incorporating it into your program?
Do you want to talk about the manual?
Yes, not everyone's looking at the manual. That's on the line, that's all. Oh, maybe. So for CHAP, for the CHAP program, what we are doing at the moment is we're writing a beautiful manual called the CHAP Clinician's Manual, and we are going to take this resource to the next level for you guys. So this resource, along with the quality indicators, we are basically operationalizing them and providing a beautiful step-by-step manual with a script and resources and everything that you would need. So if you were brand new to cardiac rehab, which all of you guys aren't, but if you were, you could just hand them this CHAP Clinician's Manual and everything would be in there. So you'll be, for those in country SA, you'll be getting a copy of the manual in due course when it's finished. It's just sort of in finalisation process now. And that further unpacks these two resources. So we're trying to do all the heavy lifting for you. And yeah, stay tuned. It's a little gift with purchase for CHAP cardiac rehab sites. So that will be coming your way.
And this education program will be providing,
yes,
almost like a mini course.
Yeah. So as this education program progresses, we'll be unpacking that a little bit more, talking about how we can sort of all work towards becoming a bit more standardized, so that when we measure everything, we're all measuring apples with apples. And then, you know, the reason why we want to measure things is A, to see if our patients are doing well, and B, to support you guys to say, okay, you know, we need some more resources here. We need to upskill you there, things like that. So yeah, it's really exciting. And the Metro, if there's anyone from Metro online, I don't think there is today, then we will also be providing you with an education program as well. So it's just education for everyone.
Website and videos.
And yeah, and we'll be developing a website and some videos as well. So all to come. Very, very keeping out of trouble, very, very busy getting all of this work done in the background. But I hope that these sessions are useful, and very happy for a dialogue, very happy for you to email me in between sessions. And it won't be me delivering every session, because you'll get sick of me and I'll get sick of me as well. So, so yeah, we'll get some guest speakers. And any suggestions for topics that you want us to unpack, or guest speakers, even if they're overseas, it's no barrier other than coronavirus, but we do have Zoom. So if there's someone that you really wanted to hear from that was a kayak rehab hero of yours through our networks, we might be able to access them as well. So really exciting. So an early session is a good session, right? So I'll just leave it for another minute if there's any final questions. Any questions from you guys here? And finished ahead of schedule again. Well done me. Is it just for the fact that I can talk really quickly?
Yeah.
Hopefully you can still understand
Like a
me.
2-hour talk.
Yeah. Look, I'm efficient. What can I say? All right. So yeah, happy for anyone to email me any questions, or if you want any extra resources, if you want access to the quality indicator paper, I might just send that around to everyone anyway, and download that from Heart Lung Circulation for you all, and send that out to the membership group. But next month we're meeting a little bit early, so I think it was the 8th of August. I can't remember now. And also, before we leave, I would be a terrible conference co-convener if I didn't once again, you won't have to have this for much longer, plug, and now my slide's not going to come up. Oh no, it's cruel. It's cruel. Anyway, I have a slide. I have a slide about the ACRA 2020 conference, which has now gone online. Oh, there you go. No, it's my slideshow has died. So make sure that you get on, have a look at the program. The full program is now available online. It's the confirmed program. Everyone's locked in. I think, well, I put it together with a team, but I think it looks really great, if I do say so myself. And very affordable to come online as well. So if you're an ACRA member, it's only $300 for 3 days of content. The other really important thing to mention about the conference is that other than the movie, everything will be recorded and available on our conference online repository for 90 days for on-demand viewing after the conference. So we have a special movie screening on the Monday night of a documentary about pump head, or post-perfusion syndrome is probably the Australian way to say it. Pump head's probably the American way. And that's not going to be available for viewing after. So that's 7 p.m. on the Monday night, and that's included in the Monday registration or the whole registration of the conference. And then there's workshops Tuesday and Wednesday. They're around lunchtime. So we really would encourage people to come to them live, because they will be interactive, but the rest of the content could be viewed at a later date. But, you know, I'd encourage you to come live to what you can, so that you can ask the speakers questions as well, and get the most out of it. So really exciting. It's been, we've done the pivot from face-to-face to virtual, but hopefully it will be as good as it can be, just minus that unfortunately that face-to-face networking, which is just not safe to do at the moment, especially in Melbourne. So yeah, if you've got any questions about the conference, feel free to email me as well. Any questions about CHAP, the education program, any suggestions, just hit me up on my email, and I look forward to all seeing you. I'll introduce next month, and then I'll step away and let other people talk at you. So have a great day, everyone, and thanks so much for joining, and thanks for your time.